17 minutes. That's all it took. Just 1,020 seconds for the FBI to storm Judge Caldwell's chambers and begin hauling out the wreckage of a 32-year career in cardboard boxes. Think about that. The man who spent decades sending thousands of people to prison was reduced to a bystander in his own office, forced to watch as federal agents rifled through his life. Witnesses say his hands were shaking, the same hands that signed life-altering warrants, the same hands that swung that gavel like a tactical weapon. They were trembling. The look on his face wasn't just shock, it was pure terror, because Marcus Caldwell knew what we didn't. He knew what was buried in those recordings. He knew the FBI wasn't just fishing. They had the bait, the hook, and the sinker. For the first time in 23 years, there was no ruling his way out of this one. So what leads the DOJ to raid a sitting federal judge in broad daylight? One recording, one fatal conversation, one moment of absolute arrogance caught on tape. Caldwell was the architect of fear in his district. The judge defendants literally prayed they would never have to face. But he finally met the one thing he couldn't intimidate: the truth. But here's the thing. This goes much deeper than one bad judge. This wasn't a wrong place, wrong time situation. It wasn't a slip of the tongue or a stroke of bad luck. This was the explosion after decades of a slow burn. Years of whispered warnings, buried complaints, and coincidental rulings finally hardened into a mountain of evidence that even the Department of Justice couldn't look away from. The recording everyone is hunting for? It's coming. I'm going to play it for you in just a second. But you have to understand the monster first, because according to federal prosecutors, Judge Caldwell didn't just bend the rules, he broke the scale. He allegedly built a shadow system designed to line his pockets and crush anyone brave enough to speak up. The lawyers knew, the clerks knew, even the other judges were whispering in the hallways. But in that courthouse, Caldwell was a god, and you don't testify against a god. At least, not until someone had the guts to hit record. What's on that tape doesn't just ruin a man, it shatters everything you believe about American justice. The scene of the crime. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just another day on the docket. But while the public saw a man in a black robe, the digital recorder saw a criminal in a high-back chair. Somewhere in those chambers, an anonymous source, whose identity is currently under a federal seal, was capturing every single word. The audio is grainy. You can hear the rustle of files and the creak of a leather chair. But Caldwell's voice? It's unmistakable. The Henderson case. I need it buried. You make sure the right clerk pulls it, and I'll make sure your firm keeps getting favorable rulings. Let that sink in for a moment. A sitting federal judge, caught in 4K, describing a quid pro quo deal like he's ordering lunch. This wasn't a one-time mistake. Listen to his words. We've done this before. Don't act like you don't know the arrangement. But it's the next part that will make your blood boil. The other voice, allegedly a high-profile defense attorney, asks about the defendant caught in the crossfire. What about the defendant? He's looking at 15 years. Caldwell's response? Then he should have hired you instead. Not my problem. Henderson goes away. Your client walks. Everybody wins. Except Henderson. But in that room, Henderson wasn't a human being. He was a bargaining chip. The audio goes cold for a second. Then you hear it. Laughter. Two powerful men chuckling over the destruction of a man's life. 15 years of a human being's existence treated like the punchline of a dirty joke. When that tape hit the light of day, first to a local reporter, then to the feds, the fallout was nuclear. Within 72 hours, the FBI had the signatures. Within 96 hours, they were breaching the inner sanctum. The fortress falls. The footage is haunting. You see agents in those iconic yellow-lettered windbreakers marching through marble hallways built to symbolize eternal authority. Court staff stood frozen. Other judges peeked out of their chambers, faces drained of color. One employee described the atmosphere as dead silent. The untouchable Judge Caldwell was finally being touched by the hand of the law. But as the FBI rifled through his desk, they realized they hadn't just found a smoking gun. They had found an armory. They weren't just looking for Henderson's files anymore. They were looking for the system. We're talking about 3 seized computers, dozens of encrypted files, the black notebooks, the ones Caldwell kept under physical lock and key. A former clerk dropped a bombshell that sent a shiver through the entire legal world. Caldwell kept lists. It was a ledger. A federal judge was keeping score like a back alley bookie, tracking which lawyers paid their dues and which defendants were marked for burial. The human cost. While Caldwell was playing God with his ledger, Marcus Henderson was rotting. He's been in a federal cell for 11 years. 11 years of his life stolen by a case that was allegedly rigged before he even stepped into the courtroom. He isn't the only one. Since the raid, 17 other defendants have come forward. But experts warn that's just the tip of the iceberg. We could be looking at hundreds of tainted cases. Every ruling, every life-shattering sentence handed down by Caldwell is now under a microscope. If you think it's about time someone pulled back the curtain on this corruption, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to show you next makes this look like a warm-up. The counterstrike. Not everyone is cheering for the FBI. Caldwell's camp is already screaming hit job. They're painting him as a tough-on-crime martyr being lynched by political enemies. His lead attorney didn't mince words. They're claiming the tape is doctored, a high-tech fabrication designed to take down a titan. It's a bold play, and when you see the evidence they're using to back it up, you might realize this isn't just a trial, it's a war for the soul of the bench. But as the dust settles, some legal experts are starting to ask the kind of questions that make people in Washington very uncomfortable. One former federal judge didn't hold back. The speed of this raid is alarming. Usually, investigating a man in a black robe is a slow, agonizing process that takes years. This was a lightning strike. That leaves us with 2 possibilities. Either the evidence is so overwhelming it's a slam dunk, or someone was hungry for a headline. The internet is already a battlefield. On one side, people are cheering for a long overdue reckoning, but on the other, people are smelling a rat. The timing. This recording is 2 years old. Why now? The source. Who is the ghost behind the microphone? Without a name, we don't know the motive. Was this a whistleblower seeking justice or a professional hit by someone with a grudge? Because here is the cold, hard truth. Federal judges make enemies. They break families and end legacies. And some families will stop at nothing for revenge. Experts warn that deepfakes and manipulated audio are more common than we think. Is Caldwell a monster finally cornered, or a titan being framed because he couldn't be controlled? The executioner. The truth is, the warning signs weren't just there, they were screaming. In the legal pits of his district, they had a nickname for him, the executioner. It wasn't about the death penalty, it was about his patterns. If you were poor or if you were black, your trial was over before it started. Prosecutors fought to get into his room. Defense attorneys felt like they were walking to the gallows. Over 15 years, a dozen formal grievances were filed. Bias, backroom deals with prosecutors, predetermined sentences, it was all there. And every single time, nothing stuck. One lawyer who tried to challenge him 7 years ago remembers the chilling advice he got: drop it, or your career in this district is over. So he stopped. They all stopped. Because Caldwell wasn't just a judge, he was a kingmaker. He mentored the oversight committees. He was tight with the police and the politicians. If you crossed him, you didn't just lose a case. You were blacklisted. You became a ghost in your own profession. The trap. Caldwell operated with total impunity because the system was his shield. Until it wasn't. The person who made that tape knew the rules were rigged. They didn't go to the oversight board. They didn't file a report that would just be shredded. They bypassed the system entirely and went straight to the press and the FBI at the exact same time. They didn't just play the game. They flipped the table. And now, Marcus Caldwell is finding out exactly what happens when the walls you built to keep people out suddenly become the walls of your own cage. The stage was set, the trap was sprung, and he never even saw it coming. Drop a like if you're starting to see the pattern here, but stay tuned because I'm about to reveal the one detail that changes the entire scope of this conspiracy. Then came the moment the history books will remember. The raid lasted 3 hours, but it was those first 17 minutes that gutted a legacy. Judge Caldwell was sitting in his chambers, the very seat of his power, when the door swung open. No heads up, no polite phone call from the Department of Justice, just federal agents with a warrant and a mission. Caldwell reportedly looked up and uttered only 5 words. "This is a terrible mistake." Then he went silent. He sat there, frozen, watching them dismantle his life. He watched them strip his file cabinets. He watched them mirror his hard drives. He even watched them bag his personal notebooks, the private black books he thought were untouchable. According to sources, he looked like a man watching his own funeral. 3 hours to seize 23 years of secrets. The hidden interrogation. But while the cameras were focused on the boxes coming out the front door, something much more calculated was happening in the back. The FBI wasn't just grabbing paper, they were grabbing people. In a separate room, agents were conducting real-time interviews with court staff. They weren't asking about general procedures, they were laser-focused on Caldwell's special relationships with high-powered firms, the irregular handling of specific dockets, and the big one, the lists. This wasn't a fishing trip. By the time the raid was over, the FBI already had enough new intel to start prepping more warrants. Caldwell thought the recording was the finish line. He didn't realize it was just the starting gun. The district on the brink. Why does this matter to you? Because plain English tells us the DOJ doesn't raid a sitting federal judge unless they have a mountain of evidence. You don't take that political risk for a maybe. And now the legal world is whispering about the nightmare scenario, the unraveling. If Caldwell was the hub of a corrupt wheel, we aren't just looking at one bad trial. We're looking at hundreds of compromised cases. We're talking about a decade of appeals, thousands of lives in limbo, a total collapse of public trust. Even the people who hated Caldwell are worried because while the lawyers argue, the victims stay behind bars. Justice delayed is justice denied, and this delay could last a generation. The system didn't just break, it protected the man who broke it until it was too late. This case is going to be the landmark for how we police the people in robes. Either we get accountability, or we admit the system is beyond repair. Smash that like button if this is hitting home. The algorithm needs to know that we're watching, because accountability only happens when people refuse to look away. Every single case this man touched over the last 20 years is now to question mark. Drop a comment below. How many people do you think were in on his network? Give me a number. We aren't just talking about a legal scandal, we're talking about thousands of human beings, thousands of families, and thousands of lives that have been ground through a machine that might have been rigged from the start. If you've ever sat in his courtroom, or if you know someone who has, this isn't just news, it's personal. Right now, defense attorneys are being hit with a tidal wave of calls. Everyone wants to know the same thing. Is my case on the list? In the coming months, we are going to see a flood of appeals that will drown the legal system. But here is the grim reality. The courts are already buried. The process will take years, maybe a decade. And while the paperwork moves, people who were potentially framed are sitting in concrete cells waiting. This is why the Caldwell case is a nightmare for due process. It's not about whether he's guilty, it's about the fact that his corruption has created a ripple effect that will take an entire generation to clean up. The honor system crisis. But the big picture is even more terrifying. If this investigation expands, and my sources are screaming that it will, we are looking at the total collapse of the federal judiciary's reputation. Congress is already scrambling to draft emergency oversight laws because right now, every federal courtroom in America is under a shadow of doubt. The glue that holds our society together, trust, has been dissolved. And here is the question no one in power wants to answer. How many other Caldwells are out there? Think about the math. If a man can operate for 23 years, ignore dozens of complaints, and silence his critics while sitting on the federal bench, what does that say about the system? There are 3,500 federal judges in this country, and they basically run on the honor system. One corrupt judge is a scandal, but a system that lets a corrupt judge reign for 2 decades? That's a crisis of legitimacy. The fatal ego. And then, just when you thought it couldn't get more chaotic, Judge Caldwell did the unthinkable. 48 hours after the FBI walked out of his office with his life in boxes, he ignored his lawyers. He ignored the warnings. He sat in front of a lens and released a personal video statement. It was a massive mistake. He looked into the camera, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a terrifying intensity, and tried to play the hero. He said, "I have dedicated my life to the pursuit of justice." He didn't look like a man seeking truth. He looked like a man who still believed he was above the law. "I have put criminals behind bars who would otherwise prey on your families. And this is my reward?" Caldwell didn't just defend himself. He played the martyr card. He called the FBI raid an ambush by political operatives. He claimed he was being hunted because he believed in law and order. But notice what he didn't say. He didn't explain the Henderson recording. He didn't address the quid pro quo deals. He didn't even mention the lists. Instead of answers, he gave us an attack. And the internet? It wasn't buying it. One viral post summarized the mood perfectly. Listening to a man who allegedly sold justice for cash lecture us on law and order is peak corruption. Suddenly, the floodgates opened. Families began posting their own horror stories, minor offenses that Caldwell turned into life sentences. The claims of racial bias weren't just whispers anymore. They were documented patterns of a man who treated certain defendants like statistics rather than people. The network cracks. While Caldwell is making videos, his alleged accomplice, the attorney on the tape, has vanished. No comments, scrubbed social media, total radio silence. But silence won't save them. Federal investigators are already rolling out the next wave of subpoenas. They aren't just looking at one judge. They are mapping an entire web of corrupt attorneys and court clerks. And get this, while the public is outraged, a defense fund for Caldwell raised $400,000 in just 3 days. We are watching the country fracture into 2 different realities. To some, he's a criminal. To others, he's a patriot being taken down by the deep state. But here's what's keeping me up at night. The timing. This recording is 2 years old. Why does it surface now, right before an election where judicial reform is the biggest talking point on the ballot? And who is the anonymous source that even the press hasn't identified? My sources inside the DOJ are telling me this is much bigger than Marcus Caldwell. One former official put it bluntly, "You don't deploy this much firepower for one judge." Caldwell isn't the end of the story, he's the entry point. Rumors are already swirling that 2 other judges in the region have quietly hired heavy-hitter defense lawyers. We're talking about judges with no public ties to this case. Yet. The FBI has the phone records. They have the clerk logs. They are preparing to drop a bomb on the entire district. When the next phase breaks, when the indictments start targeting names you actually recognize, this will become the largest judicial corruption case in the history of the United States. Caldwell is the first domino. He will not be the last. Subscribe right now because I'm covering every twist and turn of this investigation. Turn on those notifications. When the next wave of indictments drops and the other names in this web surface, I'll be right here with the full breakdown. The current standoff. Here is exactly where things stand. Judge Marcus Caldwell has been stripped of his power and placed on administrative leave. He's banned from the courthouse. He can't touch his computer, he can't enter his chambers, and he is locked out of every case file he once controlled. A federal grand jury has already been convened, and sources say at least 6 witnesses have already gone behind closed doors to testify. While Caldwell's high-priced defense team is insisting that an indictment isn't a sure thing, the movement on the ground says otherwise. The shadow investigation. But here is what they aren't telling you in the official press releases. 3 days ago, an unmarked SUV with federal plates was spotted idling outside the home of the attorney from that recording. By nightfall, that attorney had packed a bag and left town. Meanwhile, Marcus Henderson, the man who has lost 11 years of his life to this alleged setup, has finally filed an emergency motion for a case review. His family is taking the fight to the media, demanding the truth. And the judge assigned to his case? It's a new appointee with absolutely 0 ties to Caldwell's inner circle. That is not a coincidence. The 30-day countdown. In the next 30 days, the first major dominoes will fall. We'll know if Henderson gets his hearing, we'll see if more search warrants are served, and we'll find out if Marcus Caldwell is officially a defendant. The clock is ticking. But what's really keeping me up at night is Caldwell's behavior. He isn't cowering, he's doubling down. He's hiring more lawyers and screaming political persecution to anyone who will listen. He looks like a man who thinks he can still win. But stories like this, they never end clean. Final bombshell. The FBI is now hinting that the Henderson tape was just the tip of the iceberg. They are looking at dozens of other recordings captured over months, possibly years. And the whistleblower who made them? They are reportedly under emergency federal protection right now because the threats are already coming in. Then there's the rumor I'm still working to verify that Caldwell's secret list contains the name of a sitting member of Congress, someone who allegedly received favorable treatment years ago. Is it true, or is it smoke and mirrors? I don't have that answer yet, but I know this. Whatever happens next is going to be bigger than anyone, even the FBI, expected. A corrupt judge, a hidden network, and a cover-up that might reach all the way to Washington. The only question left is, will you be watching when it all unravels? Subscribe, notifications on. When this breaks, and believe me, it's going to break hard, I'll be here. Something massive is about to happen.